And as always, we welcome Claudia Chender to the Todd Veinotte Show. Claudia, how are you?
I'm great. How are you, Dan?
It's busy times, right?
It is. It absolutely is.
Now, it's back to school day today in HRM. You're past that stage now, are you, and your family?
Oh, no. I've got 3 kids who, were up with the jitters last night, like I think so many families were, trying to get out of summer and get back into school. And I dropped them all off on my way downtown this morning.
How'd that go? Everybody's happy?
It went fine. Yeah, we took the pictures. We figured out the outfits. We packed the lunches, which hopefully we can stop doing soon.
Yes.
But yeah, no, everyone's happy, and it's an exciting time for sure.
It's something we forget, that politicians have families too, and they have to go through all the same things that we go through. I guess school lunches, let's start there. Do you think that that's a good idea? Should we have that here in Nova Scotia, and should it happen soon?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we've pushed for a universal lunch program for years. We really renewed that push last year when the Minister of Education started talking about how all students in Nova Scotia have access to healthy, nutritious food at school, because of course, we have, some of the highest food insecurity in the country, and we just knew that wasn't true. So we were really pleased, along with our federal counterparts, to be pushing for and to ultimately win a universal school lunch program. Now, the devil, of course, will be in the details. So there's a website, but it doesn't have any information, and we've been told that it's coming to many schools in October, and we'll absolutely be watching for that rollout. I think my one message is to say that, absolutely every family in this province should enroll in this program. They've said it's pay what you can, but if what you can pay is nothing, which many families are in that situation right now with the cost pressures they're facing, then absolutely that should not be any barrier to taking advantage of this program. So that's absolutely the message that we're trying to get out to parents, because as someone who's been packing 3 lunches for the better part of the last decade, I know not only how time-consuming it is, but how expensive it is, and how many families really have to make some rough choices around being able to do that. And so I'm really excited that this program can alleviate some of those tough choices for people.
It's happening, and I mean, the Prime Minister was talking about it yesterday, rolling out it across the country. So we're not the only jurisdiction that's doing it. There are, however, some that are critical of it, Claudia, that suggest that they don't have any kids or any skin in the game when it comes to schools and to education, and that their tax money is going to feed other people's children. What's your response to that?
Well, I think all of our tax dollars, if they're appropriately used, go to the benefit of our society. And I guess what I would say is, what we know is that any money that's invested in those, social determinants of health is what they would be called. So things like food and housing and these basic things that we all need, and especially dollars that are invested early in the life cycle, so with kids, so whether it's childcare or food, those have huge societal dividends. Like if you just want to look at it in a dollars and cents way, those investments pay so many dividends down the line, because people are healthier, they're making less use of our social services, they're making less use of our healthcare system. So I think it's absolutely a smart investment. And I think, if you don't have a kid, you were a kid. And, I would just urge people to sort of hearken back to that time. And the reality is that up until now, we've been one of the only developed countries without a school food program. We're an outlier in that way. We recognize that this is part of taking care of and nurturing, young people, young citizens. And, this is a program that stands to benefit a huge number of people.
The new session of the legislature, the fall session, kicks off today. What's at the top of Claudia Chender's list of things to tackle as we get back to business in the benches?
Yeah, well, of course, we coming in with a pretty clear agenda based on the people that I've spent a huge amount of time talking to right across the province over the spring and summer, which is around, the cost of everything, but in particular housing. So we know that people continue to have real affordability challenges, and that the main driver of that is housing. And we just don't see the needle moving there. rents are up. People are struggling with their mortgage payments. People are struggling to buy a home. And of course, we continue to see a growth in people who are unhoused across this province. This is something where, we just aren't seeing the needle move. And we've made a number of proposals over the past number of years, and we're coming in with a bunch more. And, this government has really steadfastly maintained that the way to address housing is to incentivize developers to build. And, we are trying to make them understand in any way they can that while we absolutely need supply at every level and every one of these luxury condos that's getting built will be full, none of these buildings will address the thousands and thousands of Nova Scotians who are really just struggling to find a home they can afford. And so we need to focus our efforts at building supply and at providing housing on the people who need it the most. Otherwise, plans to, grow our workforce, retain the workers that we have, grow our population, keep Nova Scotia a province where finally young people want to stay. All of that is in peril if we don't solve the housing crisis that we're in. And so I think, based on the conversation we've had with people from one end of this province to the other, that's top of the agenda.
So should the province build houses?
Well, the province has announced that they're building some houses, but I think that, the province, based on the announcement, we are still years and years and years away from a completion of the very small number of units they've announced. I think what the province needs to do is what so many jurisdictions across this country have done and what's recognized nationally, which is to grow and incentivize the non-market housing sector to build things that are actually affordable. So there are affordable building techniques, and we have lots of little examples around this province. In Dartmouth, we have True North Crescent, which was built by the Affordable Housing Association. It uses inexpensive panelized buildings, so those panels can be put together. Our climate, Dan.
Yep.
365 days a year. They are built inside, assembled on site, so you can bypass some of the issues around skilled trade shortages. You can bypass some of the weather issues. The R values are super high, so the bills stay low. There's all kinds of ways that we can incentivize that kind of inexpensive, efficient construction, but also incentivize non-market housing providers to be doing that construction, because those are the folks who are in the business of providing housing that's affordable. Developers don't want to provide affordable housing. That's not their business. Their business is to provide market housing and to make money doing it. And that's why in the business pages of every newspaper and every periodical, we see, the REITs posting their gains. That's what they're in the business of. But what we need is housing that's affordable. And the people who can provide that housing, yes, government can build more public housing, but also we have co-ops, we have nonprofit housing societies, we have non-market housing folks right across this province who want to build, who are in a position to build, but they need support from the government. In some cases, they are open to partnerships with the private sector, and those folks need to be prioritized because they're the ones who not only are in the business of building affordable housing, but they're also in the business of keeping it affordable because that's their mission. Private sector developers, for the most part, don't want to do it, aren't in the position to do it. It's not their business line. And so we can keep building as much as we want, but it's not going to help people who are struggling to find a home they can afford. And I don't know about you, but I talk to people every day who are in that situation.
Claudia, we're up against a break. Can you stick around for another few minutes?
Sure.
Welcome back to the Todd Veinotte Show. Dan Ahlstrand with you. On the line is the leader of Nova Scotia's NDP, Claudia Chender. Claudia, appreciate you spending some time with us today. We were talking before the break about your strategy for housing, and you mentioned incentivizing people to build sort of differently. I guess my question is who are these builders? And the reason why I asked that, because I've had conversations here and out on the street not with the big developers that are putting up these mammoth, 30-story buildings, but builders that build homes and build townhomes and those kind of things, who say, well, why would I go out and buy a piece of property or get a piece of property and build something that is, full of red tape and those kind of things, when I can use that same piece of property, build a $500,000 or $600,000 home and sell it without a problem and maximize my profit and move on? How do we get people to switch their thinking from maximizing their profit on real estate to going along these plans that you suggested before the break?
Well, two things. One is, I guess what I'm trying to say, Dan, is I don't think we do. I think that developers who, if your business is to build beautiful homes and sell them and make a profit and build another one, that's fine. Those people should do that. But this is why we have a whole sector in Nova Scotia, which is the non-market and community housing sector, and their business is to build homes that are affordable. And so we should support that sector to be able to do that, because then you don't have to change the attitude. You don't have to change the hearts and minds. People who are in their business are going to continue that business, and that's fine. We have room for all of it. We have such a housing deficit. But the point is, where should government policy focus? And from our perspective, government policy should focus not on the folks who are going to find a way to build those homes in the most efficient and lucrative way for them. It's on the folks who are looking for a home they can afford. And for those folks, we think that there are real solutions in this entire sector that is not driven by profit. But, those are longer-term solutions in terms of building, Dan. We started off talking about going back into the house today.
For sure.
There's lots of shorter-term solutions. So we're proposing a renter's tax credit. We hear from people all the time who are just can't even imagine getting into the housing market right now. Prices have doubled in a few years, even just for what we think of as starter homes, not just in HRM, but right across this province. And so, what can we do to help people? Well, if people are renting, let's give them, under a certain threshold, a tax credit. Let's help them to save some of that money. We have a down payment assistance program in this province, but it's not enough. We want people, again, we want to retain workers. We want healthcare workers. We want young people to stay here. We want to grow our economy. Let's help those folks stay here. So let's increase that down payment assistance program from 5 to 10% interest free, so that we can help people get into that first home who might not have, right now, really the only people who can buy a home are people who get help from their parents or family members. There are a lot of people in this province who don't have that luxury, who don't have that possibility. Let's help them. So I think there's lots of long-term policy pieces on housing, but there's also some really good short-term stuff. And, we haven't even talked about the fact that rents have gone up 18% and that people need to find a way to be able to stay in their apartments so that they're housed at all. So there's a whole bunch of things to deal with, and we think that there are a whole bunch of tools that the government could be deploying to do it.
And that was my next question. We've talked about long-term strategy. We've talked about sort of medium strategy. How about this strategy to get people out of those tents and into apartments?
Yeah.
What's your plan for that?
Well, I think that, again, supporting the non-market housing sector to build stuff that's actually affordable. So we have part of the reason we have so many people who are living outdoors who are completely housing insecure is because we have a wait list in the thousands for public housing and for non-market housing. So if we had more units available, we would have fewer people who were unable to find a home. So we need to build that affordable housing. I mean, that's number one. I think, things like shelters and pallets, those have some intermediate, immediate use in terms of getting people indoors, giving people some dignity. But the reality is those are not permanent solutions. And so people need homes. Everyone needs a home. Everyone deserves a home in this province. We talk a lot about the challenges people are facing, but we also know that, this government is spending more money than has ever been spent before. There are lots of people in this province who are actually very comfortable we have enough that everyone deserves a home. So we need to incentivize the building of homes that people can actually afford. And that, that's going to help young families. That's going to help seniors. That's also going to help people who don't have a place to live at all and need a place where they can imagine affording the first month's rent. And in our market right now, that just doesn't exist if you're going on Facebook Marketplace or any of those, rental sites to try to find something.
A lot of concern about the rent cap that is currently in force here in the province, 5% until 2025, and a lot of concern about fixed-term leases. That's putting people out onto the street, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think the solution for that, which we've been talking about for years, is protection for renters in the form of rent control, which exists right across this country from one end to the other, so that instead of a blunt cap, which, by the way, is a failure, it's a 5% cap, our rents have gone up 18.2%. But I think what we need is rental increases that are tied to CPI. So yes, rents, can go up every year, but they can go up every year in a stable way without this fixed term lease loophole, because, landlords turn to the fixed term lease loophole because they don't want to be tied to a rent cap that may or may not have a relationship to the market or inflation. But if we have, stepped increases that are actually tied to the consumer price index that make sense in the context of the market and our economy, if we have a functional residential tenancy board where landlords and tenants can actually apply and get resolution in a timely way. So if a landlord does need to replace a heating system or a roof, they can apply for those extraordinary expenses. They can, have the income to cover that. But in the same way, if a tenant is living in subpar conditions, they can actually get that redressed. I think that would make more sense for everyone. So we have to close that fixed term lease loophole because it essentially nullifies any positive impact of that rent cap. And we absolutely need something that is more stable and more reflective of the realities of both landlords and tenants in the form of some kind of more comprehensive rental control.
So much to talk about, so little time. Claudia, I appreciate yours.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
That is the leader of Nova Scotia's NDP, Claudia Chender.